Okay, we're finally live. And now that we're live, I'm going to finally start Sequelathon. I've been playing these movies for a while, so first I'm going to push these movies out of the way, and we're going to start. I said I'd review the Resident Evil movies, so here they are. We have the first Resident Evil film. These are the Paul Anderson films. I finally got around to doing them because, well, let's just say this. I said I would do them. I forgot to do them this year for 2018 during Horroween. So, and because I did, for season 1 of Horroween, I did the video game movies and the video games instead of these movies because there are 6 films. The first one is actually pretty good. It sets up how the evil the Umbrella Corporation is and how the T-virus gets released and creates all these zombies. And it sets itself pretty well. Resident Evil Apocalypse, its sequel, brings Nemesis, brings some of the similar amount of stuff to the table, but as we notice, only a few original video game characters appear in the film. Mostly, all the Resident Evil films by Paul Anderson feature Alice, who is played by Mila Jovovich, who is his wife, and she becomes the main star. This movie, I liked it. Some people hate it and said it was this movie that killed the series. I think it was fine. After this, we had Resident Evil Extinction. Now, here's where the story gets more post-apocalyptic. Alice is basically wandering around. In fact, some people have said it, and it's actually turned out to be true. Alice is actually supposed to be like Alice in Wonderland, but just wandering around killing zombies. This movie is decent. After Alice escapes from an Umbrella lab in Resident Evil 2, she basically wanders around the world and ends up in Las Vegas, where she battles new creatures, which are supposed to be based off of the Crimson heads from, basically Crimson zombies from the Resident Evil remake game. So that's how they got them into there. Dr. Isaacs returns from the second movie, and he ends up becoming a new protagonist called the Tyrant. Resident Evil Afterlife follows up after Resident Evil Extinction. Alice kills Dr. Isaacs, the Tyrant, and then takes over all her clones. They then storm Tokyo and basically battle it out with Albert Wesker, and which culminates in most of her clones being killed off by Wesker when he blows the entire place up. And they also bring the Ouroboros type zombies, and the Magini Executioner makes an appearance in the movie. Other than that, we're also reintroduced to Claire Redfield, who has memory loss. She was also in Resident Evil Extinction. She also finally meets up with her brother Chris. There's a really cool fight scene between Wesker and Claire Redfield, so it was kind of cool. Wesker returns, having his powers. But other than that, Wesker is basically like Alice. Now, Resident Evil Retribution. Now, Alice lost her powers in Resident Evil Afterlife, so they give her powers back in Retribution. The Umbrella Corporation basically captures her, traps her in an underground testing facility. We get reintroduced to Ada Wong and also Leon Kennedy, and they even bring in Barry Burton, which I was surprised. This movie is a little bit slower, and it looks like they also bring back some of the Los Plagas and some of the Los Plagas zombies. This movie was decent. They also brought out a mega-sized mutant liquor, but other than that, this movie was slow and felt like there was a lot less story. And finally, the finale. Resident Evil, the final chapter. I got this movie on Blu-ray, and this is also the retaliation mode, which is... Alright, this movie undoes everything that the first 3 movies set up. We then find out that Alice is actually just a clone of the other founder of the Umbrella Corporation. One of the other characters, and I'm from the umbrella. And it turns out the original Dr. Isaacs did not die, but was using cloned versions of himself. Alice ended up getting sent back to Raccoon City, where the original Umbrella lab is. She meets old Alice. She also meets up with a few other characters. She meets up with Claire. She also meets up with Ruby Rose, who's in this movie, briefly. And then her and Claire seem to survive. She dukes it out, kills Isaac. Well, actually, Isaac gets killed by another clone version of himself who gets really, really pissed off. It's quite hilarious. I think it's about the funniest scene in the entire movie. It picks up where Resident Evil Retribution left off, where Alice and everyone are fighting. Sadly, though, the novelization gives us a little bit more backstory to what happened in Resident Evil Final Chapter. It turns out that they kill off Joe Valentine, who we've seen survive all the way up from Resident Evil Afterlife and Resident Evil Retribution. They kill her off. They kill off a whole bunch of people. Wesker betrays Alice again for another time and becomes a bad guy, even though he was claiming he was going to save humanity. Thus, the movies end, and this was actually the final film. All I can say is, I think the sixth and final film is kind of a mixed bag for me, because it kind of does everything that the series had set up so far. And what else can I say? They even hinted that there was going to be a sequel. That's never going to happen. These films are going to be rebooted by Sony soon, so whatever. Now, another series that was also created by the same company, Screen Gems and Lakeshore Entertainment. Underworld is another series that is the original one, starring Kate Beckinsale as part of Sequelathon. This movie is awesome. This first movie is fun. Vampires versus werewolves. The main premise is Celine, the death dealer, goes out there and fights werewolves. And during that time, she ends up running into a human who is also a descendant of the man who created the werewolves and the vampires. She ends up rescuing him. They fall in love, and then after that, she ends up saving his ass and finding out that Victor and a whole bunch of other bad people betrayed her. She had awakened Victor, which was actually against the rules, because the original vampire, Marcus, was supposed to be awoken. She wakes him up. A whole bunch of shit happens, and then we get a werewolf-vampire hybrid, which is actually a pretty cool concept. This movie is decent, and I rate this one very high on the list. The next movie we have is Underworld Evolution. Now, this movie takes what the first movie did and makes it pretty awesome. We get Marcus resurrected as a hybrid vampire werewolf bat creature. He fights the vampire hybrid werewolf. And Michael Corvin. Yes, Michael. He's also from the original movie. I know, I kind of glossed over that. But anyway, Scott Speedman stayed in this film, which was great, because afterwards, I'll tell you in a minute. But this movie is entertaining. It has a lot of action. It's good, actually. And it also brings in the original werewolf, William, who's the brother of Marcus. Who Marcus wants to bring back so the two of them can just basically rule the world, because Victor's dead. And their whole coven is destroyed. Now, we have the third movie in the series, Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. Now, this is actually a prequel, so if I were to show you guys the Underworld movie so far, you'd have Underworld, the first two films, their sequels, and the prequel. But since we're doing it as a sequelathon, Underworld: Rise of the Lycans brings back Michael Sheen, Bill Nye, and Sonia, who is played by Rona Mitra. Sonia is the original vampire that you see being burned alive in the first movie. And she's also the daughter of Victor. She ends up falling in love with Michael Sheen's character. And thus, the Lycans are born. What happened, though, is we find out that the vampires found a way to create a hybrid species when Lucian. Yes, I'm sorry, I have to reread the back of these sometimes, because even I get confused. And Lucian is the one who is in the first movie. He gets killed off by everyone. But the thing is, Lucian is not a bad character, and this movie is actually good. It actually makes his character a lot more sympathetic, which you can see why him and Craven went to betray Victor in the first Underworld movie. Now, I will say this movie is decent. As a prequel, it does a pretty good job. There's also another prequel book. There were two prequel books. So this movie's a prequel. There's a prequel novel that belongs to the movie, and so forth. But for a popcorn thriller, this movie is very good. I think it's very well done, and I find it entertaining. Now, let's go on. Underworld Awakening. Now, this is a straight follow-up to Underworld Evolution. Celine and Michael on the run. Sadly, Michael is no longer being played by Scott Speedman, who apparently decided to cancel out of this series. What happens is, the werewolves and vampires are being hunted to extinction by humans. Unbeknownst to Celine, she has given birth to a hybrid daughter, and she's been cryogenically frozen for a while. Most werewolves and vampires are being exterminated and hunted down. But in reality, plot twist, the werewolves were actually hunting down and killing the vampires and their own kind off. Kind of hilarious. Celine ends up going back in there, killing everyone, saving her daughter, and then the movie pretty much ends. Decent action. I find this one very entertaining. And now, for the fifth and final movie. Sadly, there's not a sixth one, but if there was, they would probably bring out Underworld Blood Wars. Underworld Blood Wars suffers the same fate as Resident Evil Retribution. Not much storyline. Mostly this focus is more on action. Celine meets the one guy from the fourth movie, who, of a different vampire coven. They work together. She basically helps him take over his father's convent afterwards. Yada, yada, yada. She gets basically taken out by a different another Lycan bad guy. And he basically is the one who kills Michael and takes all Michael's blood to become another hybrid. There's some plot where she's still searching for her daughter after she let her go, so on and so forth. She ends up becoming... The only decent thing about this movie is the Viking vampires. That's all that... that was a pretty high point for this movie. I enjoyed some parts of it, but the rest of it, it was like they decided they weren't going to do any more story. And Kate Beckinsale had talked about handing it off to having a character play one of her daughter in there, but who knows? If they bring out a sixth movie like Resident Evil and then in the franchise, it may work if they and create a whole new storyline, because after this, Celine basically becomes an elder vampire. So, but that'll do it for the... And, oh yeah, before I end this, the bad guy's name is Marius. Yeah. Other than that, he's a okay bad guy, I guess. Because Thomas and him basically have this one fight scene in the entire movie where Marius shoots out all the silver bullets and Thomas shoots out all the ultraviolet bullets, and they have a duel in the sunlight, shocking all the other vampires. But other than that, that's it. Thus, this ends Sequelathon. And this also ends Horroween Season 6. Yes, I know, I've been promising I'd do a Uva Bola-thon and a Kaiju-thon. So, yeah, those will be done next. Thanks for watching.